Hi, in this video, we're gonna see how to enable AWS System Manager to manage private EC2 instance in AWS. In this video, first we will see how to set up the System Manager, VPC and EC2 instance in AWS so that we can manage the EC2 instance with a private connectivity. So here, first let's walk through the design and then I'm gonna show you with the required setup. Here, as you see, like we will have an AWS account, basically AWS cloud, and in that AWS cloud we're going to use one region where we will create a virtual private cloud with or VPC. In that VPC we will use a private subnet. Within that private subnet we're going to create a EC2 instance, which means that this machine will have only private IP address, and this machine does not has any access outside the world, and outside the internet nobody can access this machine. In the sense, this machine is now purely encapsulated within a VPC, and it is a purely private connectivity now, right? So now, for example, say you want to manage the life cycle of these machines. Say like you want to run certain automations, you want to install the patches, you want to install certain binaries. Okay, in such cases, managing these kind of life cycle activities are becomes very hectic. In such cases, AWS has introduced a service called AWS System Manager. As the name says, AWS System Manager, this service is a PaaS service which will help us to manage the lifecycle of EC2 machines on AWS account. So here we will see that how we need to configure System Manager in a such a way that it can even manage private EC2 machine. Okay, when I say private EC2 machine, this machine does not has access to the internet, and internet cannot access this machine, vice versa. All right, but still, the life cycle of this machine can be managed from AWS cloud with using AWS given service called AWS System Manager. Okay, remember that since all these services that I'm showing you here are belongs to region oriented services. For example, say VPC, EC2, System Manager, all these are system region oriented services in AWS cloud, right? So here I'm using US West 2 region. All right, so here now the challenge is AWS System Manager is a PaaS service, as I said. So this also belongs in the same AWS account, and we have created EC2 machine in a VPC. Now VPC cannot talk to AWS System Manager, right? And vice versa, right? So in this cases, what are all the configurations that we need to manage? That is something I'm going to show you here, right? So basically, one more thing you need to know that AWS System Manager tries to manage these EC2 machine with using a software called System Manager, that is System Manager Agent. So each machines that you create on AWS account, you can install a software called System Manager Agent. With that System Manager Agent, the particular EC2 machine gets managed by AWS System Manager. In the sense, it will report that machine to the AWS System Manager service, and from there you can do all those lifecycle management automations, which includes patching automations, running the commands, or doing the inventories, blah blah things can be done from the AWS System Manager. Okay, now since this machine is purely encapsulated, so we need to use certain configurations, right? And here we're going to use VPC endpoint. So the symbol that you see here is nothing but VPC endpoints. So we're going to create a three types of VPC endpoints in this case here. So one is SSM VPC endpoint. We will create a SSM manager VPC endpoint, and the other one is EC2 messenger VPC endpoint, right? So I'm going to show you that how to configure those VPC endpoint on this private subnet, and eventually whichever the machines, in the sense, when you create a VPC endpoint and target to a particular subnet, the EC2 machines present in this the private subnet can leverage the capability of that VPC endpoints and tries to connect the respective services. Okay, so by default AWS provides a service capability called VPC endpoint. VPC endpoint is nothing but it's kind of a private connectivity, or basically it will create a private link between AWS EC2 machine and AWS managed PaaS services like AWS System Manager in this case. Okay, so it's going to build a private link. So through this private link, what has happened is basically the transactions between the AWS EC2 machine and AWS System Manager can happen through a private link, in the sense through a private connectivity, or in general AWS given network, backbone network, right? So the communication will happen through something like this, in the sense, as you see the arrow marks. So EC2 machine will pass its the network traffic through the VPC endpoint, and which is basically acting as a VPC private link, and through that private link, in basically it can report to the AWS System Manager, and henceforth this machine reports in the AWS System Manager. Once the machine reports to the AWS System Manager, which means that the agent installed on AWS EC2 machine is now activated, right? So basically AWS has so many images, maximum almost all images now supports the SSM agent is already been installed in them. Here I'm using Amazon Linux AMIs. So Amazon Linux AMIs comes with the default SSM agent is installed with them. So for that case, we don't need to run certain list of commands to install the software. But in certain cases, for example, say if you are creating a virtual machine or EC2 instance in the VPC, and if that does not has an SSM agent installed on that one, in such cases you need to make sure that SSM agent of respective OS should be installed. Once the OS is installed and we have enabled the VPC endpoint, then only the SSM agent starts to communicate to the AWS System Manager. Okay, and once that is been done, then only the machine gets appeared in a System Manager. Okay, so basically this is the basically design walkthrough that I have done here to make sure that this machine gets reported to the SSM Manager, and from there we can do all those automations. All right. So now what I do is I'm going to take you to my AWS account, so where I can show you these configurations. So currently I'm in my AWS account. So currently I'm in Oregon region, as you see here, and we are in VPC service page. So as you see here, we are currently in a VPC service page. If I refresh it here, so what I did is I have already created a VPC called say for example, let me call it as the cloudquicklabs demo VPC. So I have not given the name of the VPC, so now I'm giving it. So basically I have a VPC with the class B CIDR range, that is 172.32.1.00/16. Okay, so this is nothing but a private VPC, a private CIDR based VPC. So we have created a VPC. Underneath that VPC, there are 4 subnets are been created. For example, say subnet 1, 2, 3. Whatever you see that the subnet with the name like private subnet, it is basically the subnet where I'm going to create the EC2 machine in a while. So in this one, so after that one, we also have a route table. So if I can show you the route table, so this route table is associated with all the subnet, but don't get confused here. I have not have any routes to the IGW, right? So even though I have a IGW, I have not attached that IGW, which I'm going to show you here, right? So if I go to the IGW, that is Internet Gateway option, so I have a IGW here, Internet Gateway abbreviated as IGW. So IGW is detached from the VPC, and if you go to the route tables of this VPC, it does not has any routes to the IGW as well. So it has only one route, that is nothing but enabling communication within the VPC. So till now we have seen 3 resources, that is VPC's subnets, we saw the route table, we saw the Internet Gateway as well. So Internet Gateway is completely detached, in the sense it is useless. Since I say it is a private EC2 machine, we are not using either IGW or we are not using NAT, that is network address transformation. All right, so now with this option, so we will directly jump to the endpoint. So we were talking more about endpoints. Okay, basically here managing the private EC2 machine is happening through a mechanism called VPC endpoints, right? So here you see that we have a VPC, and within that VPC we created as private subnets. Within the private subnet, we're going to create the VPC endpoints. Since we are interacting with the AWS System Manager, AWS System Manager provides its own VPC endpoints. So in total, we have to create 3 VPC endpoints. So which are all those, we're going to see right away. So here, if I click on VPC endpoints, you see that I have already created VPC endpoint, right? So for example, say we created endpoint with the name .ssm, SSM messages, and EC2 messages. Okay, so you must need to create endpoints belongs to your region. So my region is US Oregon region, right? So we need to create US West 2 SSM, US West 2 SSM messages, US West 2 EC2 messages. Okay, so I have already created these for my VPC. Okay, but for your help, I'm going to show you how to create that. Since I have already created for this VPC, it will not show again. So but just I can mimic here. So you click on create endpoint, that button, then it will take you here, say like a demo, and then in the service categories, use services, and here you need to choose those SSM. If you click on this SSM, so you're going to see this one, right? So choose the for example, say first we are creating .ssm endpoint, right? Once you select this one, you need to see the type. So here the type should be interface. Why interface? Because we want to interact within the VPC through the AWS backbone network. In the VPC, we're gonna choose the VPC that is our default VPC, and then once you choose the VPC, automatically the subnets belongs to that VPC gets populated. You can choose those subnets. So in our case, I'm using a subnet with the name like private one, right? So like this I have selected, and in the sense in which subnet you are keeping the EC2 machine, you need to choose that, right? So likewise what I did is, in this case I have selected all the subnet just for the demo purpose. So you need to select like this, and in the security group, in the sense this VPC endpoint will be associated with the security group, which is acting as a firewall, which actually controls your inbound and outbound routes. So you need to select a security group as well. So here in my case, I have used a default security group with a certain inbound and outbound rules, which I'm going to show you. Here, if you want, you can build the policies as well. For now, we are not using. And as I'm given the name demo, so you can click on a create endpoints. Okay, so likewise, so once you click on a create endpoint, it will automatically create an endpoint. So likewise, you can search for the other two endpoints, like as I said, SSM. If you type SSM, you will have another endpoint with a name like, for example, SSM messages. Click on that and follow the same step, like selecting that, selecting the VPC, then selecting the subnets, right? And choosing the subnet IDs like this, and then selecting the security groups after that, right? And then finally click on, so you select the group like this, and then click on a create endpoint. So you need to do this for the 3 times for 3 the 3 endpoints. Okay, so for example, say here so here what we are doing is we are actually want to select the EC2 messages as well, right? So select this like this for the 3 time. Okay, again select the subnets, right? And select the security groups and click on create endpoint. So once you do these 3 iteration, one for SSM, one for SSM messages, one for EC2 messages, you should be able to create the endpoint like this, and the status of all the 3 has to be in a available state. So what does that mean? In the sense, you have a VPC, you have the subnets, you have the proper routes, and you have the endpoints enabled on that one. Okay, and one more thing is in the security group. So here I was talking more on the security group, right? So in this region I have only one security group, that is default security group. According to AWS, we should not use any default security group, but as AWS says, you can create your own security group and try to configure the inbound and outbound rules as I am suggesting here. So in this case, we need to manage the certain inbound rules like this. So basically, we need to allow HTTPS inbound access to the VPC CIDR. In the sense, whatever the VPC CIDR range you have, you use that CIDR range as a source and select the type of the port equal to 443, and then you need to choose the security group to allow the the connection within the VPC. Okay, basically I would recommend you to maintain these 2 inbound rules, and then we will go to the outbound rules. So generally, whatever the configurations by default available on the security group, that is allow all traffic for the outbound rules, so we will keep it as it is. All right, so with that configurations, we are done with the settings on the VPC side. Okay, so here configurations on the VPC side are playing a major role, right? So we have a VPC, we have a private subnet. Now we are enabling the VPC endpoints. So with this setup, we are actually done with the required configurations on the VPC side. Now let's go ahead and spin up a EC2 machine, and let's see how does that machines reports to the AWS SSM Manager, even though there are no public connectivity. All right, so I will go to my next tab. So this is my next tab, which is actually my AWS EC2 service page, and I'm in Oregon region. Remember that we are playing in a US West 2 region or Oregon region. Now what I do is I'm going to create a launch a EC2 machine in front of you. Say like I'm going to give this name as demo lab, and in this one here I'm going to use AMI, that is Amazon Linux AMI. We're going to use free tier AMI only. Architecture is 64. We're going to use instance type eligible for the free tier, that is T2 micro. And then in the key pair, I have already created a key pair with the name like cloudquicklabs, so I'm going to use that. In the network settings, so we're going to click on edit, and we're going to choose our subnet one. Why subnet one? Because this is the subnet I have designated to create a EC2 machine, and it is a private subnet. And in the auto assign public IP address, we're going to disable it. In the firewall or security group, we're going to use our security group, that is default security group, which I have walked you through. where you're going to manage the inbound and outbound, right? So generally on this security group, you need to maintain all traffic from your VPC CIDR on port number 443 at inbound has to be managed. Okay, so with that configurations, I'm not going to go to the down the line. Basically, that is um, in the advanced networking, you can keep it default configurations. You can keep it default, and in the basically here, right? So here in the user data, so I'm going to just recommend you one thing on the user data just for the safer side. So what you do is on the user data, you need to put one piece of code, that is few lines of code, which actually make sure that the certain configurations are already there for SSM agent, right? So as I explained in the diagram, basically the communication between EC2 machine and AWS System Manager is happening through a software called System Manager Agent or SSM agent, right? So that SSM agent has to be configured with a certain configurations. Okay, so generally it tends to communicate over the public route. When public route is not available, it will try to find out the VPC endpoints. Once the VPC endpoints is there, it will try to communicate through that way. Okay, so that software is been configured, in the sense that software is written to do in a such a fashion only. Now since we are communicating through the VPC endpoints, so I would just recommend you to keep the configurations of your agent something like this. Okay, so for that case, so whenever you are spinning up a machine, so try to give this configurations in your user data. What is basically user data is nothing but whenever machine is getting spinned up, once the machine is ready, you need to do certain code, you need to run certain piece of configurations, you need to run certain piece of command line or PowerShell or shell scripting based on your OS version to make certain configurations. So that's what the user data is being kept it here. So in this one here, we are giving one bash script which actually install a SSM agent, and agents configurations which is kept in a JSON file in a particular path will be modified like this. In the sense, it will actually modified the Amazon SSM agent.json file will be modified like this. In the sense, here region, you need to give the region where your machine has been created, and VPC endpoint is nothing but you give the endpoint IP, endpoint ID of the SSM that is ending with SSM. In the sense, the service endpoint ending with .ssm, what is the VPC endpoint ID? So you copy that VPC endpoint ID and you can replace it here. In the sense, that is what I have done it here. So these configurations I have got it from the document, but you can try without configuring this one. If agent works, great. If not works, it should be working for you as well, at least. And in the start SSM agent, basically in the last line, we are using sudo systemctl start amazon -ssm agent, which actually restart the the agent. All right, so these are the configurations which I'm giving, and here I'm not checking user data already has been base 64 encoded. Now with that configurations, I'm going to launch this machines in front of you. Now while it is launching, what I do is I'm going to go to the system manager. Okay, so now I will open my another page, that is my another tab in this browser. You see that this is my AWS account again, and we are in AWS System Manager. In this System Manager, you see that I'm in a Oregon region. Okay, so all the region has to be basically your EC2 VPC, your VPC, EC2 and SSM has to belongs to a same region. Okay, so currently we are in Oregon region, remember that. Now we're going to go to the node management. Underneath the node management, so there is an option called basically there is an option called fleet manager. If you go to the fleet manager, so what does that fleet manager is tell us? So fleet manager gives you some hint that whether the SSM agent on that EC2 machine is working or not. For the testing purpose, I have created two machines called the like test2, test Linux, and these machines are reporting here. Okay, so if I go to the my EC2 page, right, so we have spinned up a machine, and that machine is in progression state, right? So you see that currently it is in an initializing stage, and before that machine has been created, we had two machines called Linux test machine name. Okay, so those machines are already reporting. Now we expect another machine which is just now created should be reporting here. So how does this fleet manager works is basically fleet manager works through a SSM agent capabilities. In the sense, machine has to be installed with the SSM agent, and SSM agent has to be configured with the configuration so that it can report back to the system manager. Once machine gets reported here in the fleet manager nodes list, which means that your machine is basically managed. Yeah, and from there we can experiment the private connectivity based lifecycle management of EC2 machine. All right, so if I go back to the diagram, so what we did till now is we had a VPC, we created a subnet, and we created a private endpoint of three types, that is SSM, SSM manager, EC2 messages. Okay, so in total 3 VPC endpoints we created on this subnet, and then we created an EC2 machine. Now this machine is purely private machine, and it does not has any internet access, and our internet even does not has access on this machine. So okay, now how to make this machine connected to the system manager, and from there we can do a all life cycle management activity, right? So and that should be automatically happening. Okay, so this is, remember that, so don't get confused. VPC is a one service, EC2 is a one service which actually uses a VPC CIDR or VPC configurations or VPC references, and we spin up that machine. Okay, and on that VPC we just created an endpoint. So and we don't have any IGW, we don't even have the NAT gateway as well. Now the question is, how does that this private machine will be able to communicate to the system manager? Okay, and that will be happening through a endpoint. So for the sake, what I do is I'm going to refresh it right now. So let's see that this machine is currently in a initializing stage. So we're going to give a couple of seconds. What I do is I'm going to keep it in a wait mode, and then we're going to come back once this machine gets in a checked state. Okay, so generally it will take 2 minutes, so I don't want to keep on a hold. So let's wait for a couple of minutes. Once this machine gets reported, or once the status change happens, I'm going to start from there. Okay, so let's go on wait for a second. As you see here, the machine has been went in a status check, in the sense all 2 out of 2 status checks were passed, but still machine is not reporting into the managed instances. Okay, now I am again came back to enable with you a certain instance insights. Okay, so here this EC2 machine is lacking one configuration, that is this machine is not attached with an IAM role which is acting as a instance profile role, right? So if I go to the other machine which is already working, you see that that machine is attached with a EC2 instance profile role. Okay, so here we're gonna attach an EC2 IAM role which is acting as a EC2 instance profile role. So for that case, what I do is I'm gonna go to the actions. In the actions, we're gonna go to the security. In the security, you choose on a modifier role, and we have to attach one EC2 instance profile role. So I'm going to attach this EC2 instance profile role to that machine. So now this machine is now attached with an IAM role. I'm going to open this IAM role and show you the required configuration that you need to maintain on that EC2 instance role, which is acting as a profile role basically as well. Yeah, so this is acting as an instance profile role as well. Now in the permission side, so I have given very extra permissions. As you see that I have given an admin privilege, plus Amazon SSM managed instance core permissions also been given here. So what means that you need to give required permissions here. Make sure that you must give the access, in the sense you must give SSM agent with these permissions, in the sense your IAM role should have Amazon SSM managed instance core permissions, right? Okay, so with that, along with that, you need to maintain a trust relationship configurations in that IAM role, and that IAM role should be trusted by ssm.amazon.com principal, right? So make sure that it has a trust relationship with the ssm.amazonaws.com service principal as well, right? Under the hood, what I mean to say is you make sure that that IAM role which is you attached as an instance profile role has a trust to the SSM service. All right, so that's the configurations we again added on the EC2 machine after my machine becomes in a allable state. Now let's refresh it from our side. Basically it's going to take a couple of like nearby 2 minutes. So what I do is I'm going to go on a mute again, or go on a hold again, and I will come back once the machine is being reported there. So generally once the machine is actually what I can say created, and status checks got passed and prerequisite are met, generally it's going to take a couple of minutes to report to the SSM agent. Okay, so basically there is a periodic scan happens from the SSM agent side, which will actually checks all the configurations, and wherever it can pass through, like first it will check through the internet. If it is not, then it will search through the VPC endpoint. So wherever the connections happens, it will try to connect through that mode only. So right now we have enabled the VPC endpoint mode. Let's wait for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to come back once it is reported to the managed nodes under fleet manager in AWS SSM. Okay, after waiting for more than 5 minutes, the agent got reported into the into the fleet manager. So I'm going to take you to the my SSM manager, that is SSM system manager. Underneath the system manager, if I go back to the fleet manager underneath the node management, and now our demo machine, that is demo lab machine, is now reporting to the fleet manager. Okay, so if you go back to the EC2 dashboard or EC2 service page, and we click on this demo lab machine and click on connect, now you see that session manager, which is nothing but under the backend, it uses the SSM agent capabilities to connect a session to this EC2 machine. Okay, now that is working. If I can click on this, it will take me to the web-based session on my this machine. Okay, so now I can type host name, right? So what this mean is, if I go back to the diagram, even though I don't have any the private even though I don't have any connectivity to the internet, which is nothing but from my laptop, if I want to connect to this machine, I need to go through the internet. Even though there is no internet way, we are still able to manage this machine with using AWS System Manager capabilities, and that too having a private connectivity. All right, which is the safest and secure method and highly recommended for all enterprise grade EC2 machine management. All right. Now, not only from the EC2 dashboard page, we can also try to manage this machine from the system manager or basically from the fleet manager. Okay. So now what I do is I'm going to click on this node, and we're going to click on the node actions. Underneath the node actions, you see that I can connect to this machine again from the fleet manager underneath the system manager. Now I can again type the something like the Linux word saying like date or ls-l, right? So you see that I can basically run all those commands. Okay, now finally we're gonna show you one more thing, that is how we can run a command on this machine from the fleet manager. Okay, so if I click on this, that is on this one option, and if you go to the tools, underneath the tools, right? So what I do here is I selected my machine, I go to the node action. Underneath the tools, we will see there are so many tools are there, but here I'm going to show you execute a command. Right now, once the machine gets managed underneath the SSM, that is system manager, with a private connectivity, now you can do lot many automations on that. Okay, so first one is like running an automation commands or running the commands on that machine, or you can do patching, you can do blah blah things on that machine. Yeah, now let me say a shell. Okay, so let's say I want to run some shell script because this is a Linux machine. So I'm going to choose a document called run shell script. We're going to use the default version, and here we're going to run a shell or bash command called ls-l, which is actually run some just list the command. Yeah, now what is the thing that I'm showing here is just that just to make you sure that you can run the command once the machine gets managed underneath the fleet manager, right? And rest all configurations I'm going to give keep it default. And okay, so if I go back this one, so we chosen the SSM document, that is AWS run script, document version default, command we want to run is ls-l, working directory, that is fine, I'm going to keep it default. Choose the instance manually because yeah, we are selecting the instance from the list. Parameter you can pass on. Rest all configurations you can explore on your own way, but right now just wanted to show you that it works fluently. Okay, so if I just click that command, and you see that it has just now worked like this. Okay, just like that it got completed. If I go to the run command history and go to the histories, we will see that recently we just now executed the command and it got succeeded. If I open that command ID history, you can see that this has been targeted on this machine and that got executed seamlessly. All right, or for example, say you want to play around it with it, right? For example, say if I go to the node, go to the tools, yeah, go to the for example, say tools, go to the go to the basically go to the, so for example, say what we do is we're going to create a file underneath certain path. Okay, so you can also do all those magics. Yeah, but for now, just since this has been very long, so what I do is with this node I have shown you that once the machine is being reported to the fleet manager, you can do all those automations, okay, including the running the commands, doing the state manager activities. You can do a patching, you can do all those inventory configurations. So lot many things can be done once the machine reports to the SSM manager. Okay, the specialization of this video is that you are managing the machine with a private connectivity. All right, so with that note, I have shown you the things need to be shown in this video. Finally, I can request, please do subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. With that note, thank you, thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.